Order for June 13th, 2022. We have 4 items on public hearing. The first item is TP Ordinance 2219, an ordinance to amend and enact TP Ordinance 1904, Amwaste of Louisiana contract for the petitioned rate and price increase. Anyone to speak on that item? The next item is TP Ordinance 2220, an ordinance placing 15-mile-an-hour speed limit signs on Anna Drive of the Shadows subdivision in District 10. The next item is TP Ordinance 2221, an ordinance reducing the speed limit to 20 miles an hour on South Bennett Road and placing slow children at play and caution one-lane road signs at the intersection of West Bennett Road to the end on District 4. And the last one is TP Ordinance 2222, an ordinance declaring surplus TPG asset number miscellaneous 0241 16092 East Paradise Park Lane in Independence, assessment number 3774904, and to authorize the parish president or his authorized designee to sign any and all documents in regard to the sale and transfer of the property to Camp Serenity LLC. All right, if there's no one to speak on those items, we will move into our regular business. If you have a cell phone, please mute it or turn it off at this time. We'll have our invocation by Mr. Wells, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Forrest. Mr. Zoo, if you would call roll, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Present.
Mr. Ingraffia?
Present.
Mr. Joseph? Mr. Bruno? Mr. Richtel?
Here.
Mr. Mayu?
Here.
Mr. Wells?
Here.
Mr. Vial?
Here.
Ms. Hyde?
Here.
Ms. Coates?
Here.
All right, hopefully everyone's had a chance to look over their minutes from the last meeting. If there are no corrections or questions, I'll entertain a motion to accept.
Also move.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Wells, second by Mr. Mayu. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ingraffia?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno? Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayu?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Ms. Coates?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
All right. Item 12 will be pulled from the agenda, so there will be no public input received on that item tonight. If there's anyone that would like to address another agenda item that was not heard on public hearing, you can do so at this time. If not, we'll have Mr. Miller come and give us his report.
Ms. Hyde, can I ask a question here?
Yes, sir.
Are we planning on taking another look at this?
Yes, sir. It'll come back to the committee. We actually have a meeting at 2 o'clock on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're good to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good evening. We only have a couple of items. The first one is approval of change order number 1 for the landfill cell 15 construction. It's actually deleting an overhead electrical system Evidently, it's not necessary any to do the job, so it reduces the cost by $165,000. I think those change orders are ones we like.
I'll make the motion.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Forrest, second by Ms. Coates. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno? Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Ms. Coates?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Graffia?
Yes.
Thank you. The next item, actually, the bid for the Tangipahoa Fiber Broadband Initiative for the materials. We only received one bid, and it did not have a bid bond, so technically we received no bids. We would like to go back out for bid, but we will change it since we only got one bid. This particular bid, we were attempting to get all of the materials for the full loop, the whole loop around the parish. We believe that the reason that caused fewer companies or only one company to bid because it's a long-term project that didn't want to fix their costs. So we believe we're going to go out for bid for just the first phase, the phase that goes from Amite to Kentwood, and included materials and construction in the same bid. That way it'll hopefully get more bidders and move the project maybe back on track time-wise. So that's what we're going to do. I don't know if there's any action has to be taken for that or not. So that's informative, okay? So that's what we will be doing. So I don't have any other
Okay.
action items. The only thing I'd like to do is update you, and I'm sure that Councilwomen Hyde and Coates would probably want to talk about this too, and they may later. Last week, the parish was recognized by DEQ with an Environmental Leadership Award. We were recognized for our attack on litter, predominantly the litter getter, the 3 litter getters we have in our waterways, and then whenever you combine that with our education program where Ginger Tie-State goes into the schools, and our enforcement department going after the folks, digging through the trash, doing all the things they do, and the advertising on billboards if you get caught and all that stuff. All that was taken into consideration, and so DEQ, we were recognized. There were several, but we were recognized as doing some good stuff against litter. So I want to make sure that y'all know that, and our guys are doing a good job working on it. If y'all don't have any questions, I am finished. Yes,
I
sir.
do need a motion to rebid that.
Oh, you do?
item.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, okay, I second.
All right, have a motion by Mr. Vial, second by Mr. Wells. Roll call, please.
Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Ms. Coates?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Graffia?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
You had a question?
I know that, the contractors,
Carla, turn your mic on.
the contractors with the stumps and all have left, is that my understanding?
No, sir.
They still here?
The stumps, yeah, they're still working.
Okay.
The debris is done.
Okay, so the debris is done, anything that's left, we're gonna handle? Is that how it's gonna work?
If it's storm related, I'd rather say that we don't have any, but I'm sure we'll have to pick up some.
Okay.
But the stumps are still being picked up.
Do we know anything? Because I'm telling you, I don't know where they're picking up, but they're not picking up nowhere that I see.
Okay, well,
I've got stumps galore.
Well, the monitors are saying it, and the trucks, the reports we're getting are still picking up debris. I mean, loads per day, 4 and 5. We've had 7 crews working, so I'm not sure exactly where. We'd have to get. If I'd have known you wanted to know, I'd have made sure we had all that.
Can we do some spot checking on these people to see if
We
they
do.
are actually working on the road and they're not going in somebody's yard and picking up?
Yes, sir.
But, I mean, it's to the point, I can't tell people that they're still coming after 9 months.
Well, but they are. I mean, we get emails and calls, and we talk about it. The people sit back and say, "Thank you, they came." You know, so I know it's happening whenever if we're getting complaints. So
Can we get, maybe
Well,
by the next meeting,
we'll
or maybe
find out.
have
Yes,
one of
sir.
them come up here and explain
Yes, sir.
where they're working and
okay.
if it's
Yes, sir.
okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, we'll move into our regular business. The first item is approval of official journal bid for the Tangipahoa Parish Council beginning July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. We have a bid from the Daily Star for $6 per 1,000 words. I'm sorry, 100 words.
I so move, Madam Chair.
Second.
All right, have a motion by Mr. Wells, second by Mr. Vial. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Ms. Coates?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Graffia?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yeah.
Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
All right. Item 4, adoption of TP Ordinance 2219, an ordinance to amend and enact TP Ordinance 1904, Am Waste of Louisiana contract for the petitioned rate and price increase.
Also move.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Ridgell, second by Ms. Coates. Roll call, please.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Ms. Coates?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Graffia?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Adoption of TP Ordinance 2220, an ordinance placing 15-mile-an-hour speed limit signs on Anna Drive of the Shadow subdivision in District 2. I'm sorry, District 10.
I so moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Ms. Coates, second by Mr. Vial. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Ms. Coates? Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Graffia?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yeah.
Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Adoption of TP Ordinance 2221, an ordinance reducing speed limit to 20 miles an hour on South Bennett Road and placing slow children at play and caution one-lane road signs at the intersection of West Bennett Road to the dead end in District 4.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Bruno, second by Mr. Forrest. Roll call, please.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Ms. Coates?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Graffia?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
And the last adoption is TP Ordinance 2222, an ordinance declaring surplus TPG asset miscellaneous 024 at 16092 East Paradise Park Road, Lane in Independence, assessment number 3774904, and to authorize the parish president or his authorized designee to sign any and all documents in regard to the sale and transfer of the property to Camp Serenity LLC.
So move. That's that piece that was abandoned and
That's the piece that we acquired through, the hazard mitigation.
Nothing can be
Nothing can ever
built.
be put on, no structures can be put on at all, and then the neighbor will take care of it, use it, but it'll just be green space from now on.
so move.
I second.
I have a motion by Mr. Bruno, second by Mr. Wells. Roll call, please.
Ms. Coates?
Yes.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Graffia?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yeah.
Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes. All right, we have quite a few introductions. The first one is introduction of TP Ordinance 2223, an ordinance amending and enacting Chapter 36, Planning and Development, Article 7, Approval Process and Procedures, Section 36-172, Procedural Process for Subdivision of Property.
This has to do with, if I may, planning and development looked at this, rec committee, and has to do with trailer count and, that single-family units that are moved out have to be replaced by single-family units, okay? That's pretty much the language change. Also move.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Vial, second by Ms. Coates. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest?
Yes.
Mr. Graffia?
Yes.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Richtel?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Vial?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Ms. Coates?
Yes.
Introduction of TP Ordinance 2224, an ordinance amending and enacting Chapter 42, Streets, Roads, Sidewalks, and Drainage.
This is another one that the Developmental Rec Committee looked at, and Misty is here, but it's a number of different changes, minor changes that have taken place. I think former parish engineer started this work. Misty kind of looked at it. She's kind of blessed it, so to speak. I don't know, she's here if you have any questions. It has to do with, specifying language like the parish, has a right of 18 inches behind the ditch rather than, we use that language, but it's not in here. different stuff like that. So Misty is here. Anybody like to speak, ask any questions? If not, I'll also move.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. VL, second by Mr. Mayhew. Roll call, please.
Mr. Graffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Richtel,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
All right. Introduction of TP Ordinance 2225, an ordinance adopting Appendix C to the Tangipahoa Parish Code of Ordinances.
This is another one that was looked at, and basically it is what it says. The appendix wasn't attached or adopted, so this is just approving that. Also move.
I'll second.
Have a motion by Mr. VL, second by Mr. Ingraffia. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Richtel,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Graffia,
Yes.
All right. Item 11, introduction of TP Ordinance 2226, an ordinance placing 15-mile-an-hour speed limit signs on Madeline Court in District 5.
So move.
I second.
Have a motion by Mr. Ridgetill, second by Mr. Wells. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Graffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Item 13, introduction of TP Ordinance 2228, an ordinance to grant a variance to Section 36-1.
Huh?
If not, Madam Chairman, I move that we table number 12.
Okay.
Second.
Who's, Joey, you second? All right. I guess so. When we said we pulled it earlier, I thought I didn't know we had to vote on it. Okay. So back to item 12. I had said earlier that we were pulling that from the agenda, but we have a motion by Mr. Wells, second by Mr. Mayhew, that we pull it. So roll call.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Graffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Okay. Item 13, introduction of TP Ordinance 2218, an ordinance to grant a variance to Section 36-112, Special Classification Property Development Standards, A, mobile/manufactured home placing standards for placement on a single lot for Donald L. Beagle Jr., mini partition, owner of Beagles Realty LLC, assessment number 6552876, parcel C in District 2.
Yeah, this is my district, and this guy was about 90% finished with the old ordinance, and he got caught up in the new ordinance. So the planning commission all reviewed it and all looked good, so I'm gonna go ahead and make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Ingraffia, second by Mr. Forrest. Roll call, please.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Graffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Item 14, introduction of TP Ordinance 2229, an ordinance to grant a variance to Section 36-112, Special Classification Property Development Standards, A, mobile/manufactured home placement standards for placement on a single lot for Miller Family Partition, owner of CNC Elite Properties, assessment number 6410871, track A-1 in District 2.
Yeah, same thing. Guy about 90% through and got caught up in the new ordinance. So I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, have a motion by Mr. Ingraffia, second by Mr. Ridgetill. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Graffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Introduction of TP Ordinance 2230, an ordinance amending and enacting Chapter 44, Surface Mining Operations, Article 2, Dirt Pits and Ponds, Section 44-49, Special Regulations. We're just adding the wording that the required buffer may be waived in writing from the adjacent affected property owners.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Ridgetill, second by Mr. Mayhew. Roll call, please.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Ingraffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yeah.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
The last one is introduction of TP Ordinance 2231, an ordinance to grant a variance to Section 36-112, Special Classification Property Development Standards of Mobile/Manufactured Home Placement for Shira Finn, 13300 East Palmetto Street, Amite, Louisiana, assessment number 470406, Tract C in District 3.
So moved.
Who seconded that? John? Okay. I have a motion by Mr. Bruno, second by Mr. Ingraffia. Roll call, please.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Ingraffia, Mr. Bruno,
Yeah.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes. Right, we have one resolution, adoption of TP Resolution R2214, a resolution of the Tangipahoa Parish Government approving the 2022 Housing Choice Voucher Utility Allowance Schedule.
Also move.
Have a motion by Mr. Wells, second by Mr. Mayhew. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Ingraffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
All right, I have two new appointments. Both of these are to the the Communications District 1 Board. The first one is coming from the hospital. Have Kirsten Rainey. She is replacing Karen Volkman. Someone would make that motion? It's the 911 board, but this is the hospital's appointment.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Vial, second by Mr. Ridgetill. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ingraffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
And the second one is Tangipahoa Parish Government and Mr. Miller are appointing Michael Thornhill, replacing Mr. John Ballard.
So move.
Have a motion by Mr. VL, second by Mr. Forrest. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Ingraffia,
Yes.
And we have a reappointment to the Hammond Area Rec District 1. Mr. Buddy, this is
So move for Mr. Guy Ricotta.
I'll second.
motion by Mr. Ridgetill, second by Mr. Wells. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Ingraffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Okay, beer, wine, and liquor, we have two. The first one is Phil and Chill LLC, 43370 South Airport Road in Hammond.
So move.
Have a motion by Mr. VL, is that Ingraffia? Second by Mr. Ingraffia. Roll call, please.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Ingraffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yeah.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
And the next one is L&L Family Grocery and Deli LLC, 56388 Highway 445 in Husser.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Ingraffia, second by Mr. Bruno. Roll call, please.
Mr. Vial,
Yes.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Ingraffia,
Yes.
Mr. Joseph, sorry, Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Ridgetill,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
All right, legal matters.
Nothing to report this evening.
Okay. Councilman's privileges.
I have one.
Okay,
Actually, I have two.
go ahead.
I have a
Microphone.
situation.
Turn your, it's on his own.
I have a situation.
Listen.
Tracy's here and also, this has been going on for about 2 years, maybe a little more than 2 years. We had a guy who skirted the building process by building a little shed, and then he enlarged that little shed to about 10 times the original size and opened a business in it. No permits were ever issued. The distance between two properties, which is supposed to be 25 feet, he's 8 feet to the property line. There was supposed to be a privacy fence put up. He's running his rainwater onto these people's property, and the business that he has is in the process of processing animals, so that's running across these people's property. We have worked with him and worked with him and worked with him, and 2 years have passed. He went through another season, this last season, of processing animals, and his deal is to stall as long as he can. He's stalled as long as he can. I want to start the proceedings to pull the lights on this business, cut the lights off until all of what he is in violation of is corrected. If he doesn't correct it, there will be no more lights to this. And I've had enough with it. The people in the office have had enough with it. Everybody's been out there. The engineer that he hired has given him recommendations of what needs to be done. He's not doing that. And it's just stall, stall, stall. And I will not let him operate one more year with this. He usually starts September or October. So whatever we got to do, I want them lights pulled before then. And this is it. Now, he has one last chance. I don't care if we contact him and tell him this is it, but there's not going to be no 2-3 weeks waiting on him to make a decision. If he's not going to do this right away, I want something executed immediately, because it is a damn mess, and those people next door have put up with this and put up with it. He is supposed to have an 8-foot board fence behind the property. His answer to it was he bought used fencing that was 6 foot, and he was going to put it 2 foot off the ground. Okay? So this is the kind of guy that we're dealing with. So I want it, Brad, whatever we got to do. Tracy's very familiar with it. Missy's familiar with it. She's been out there. Whatever we got to do, we've got enough paperwork, and I think we've got enough stuff that we give him ample amount of time to correct the situation.
Yes, sir.
So if you need a motion to make that legal, I put it in a form of a motion that we take legal action to remove the electricity. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll make a motion that we add it to the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Bruno, second by Mr. VL, that we add this item to the agenda.
Ms. Hyde,
Yes.
Ms. Coates,
Yes.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Graffia,
Yes.
Mr. Joseph, Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Richtel.
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Mr. Vial.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, my motion will be that we take immediate action to have the lights withdrawn from this business, and as soon as possible.
Do we have to say the business's name?
You don't have a name of it?
Yeah, but I don't know, should we name names, or would it matter?
I know who it is.
Okay. I don't mind telling y'all, but
I know, I just wanted to, I thought it might be proper in the motion, I didn't know.
if we need to do it, I will, but it's up to you, Brad. I don't know if we need to mention names or anything like
I
that.
know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
Second here.
I have a motion by Mr. Bruno, second by Mr. VL, that we take action against this person to have their electricity disconnected. Roll call, please.
Mr. Forrest,
Yes.
Mr. Graffia,
Yes.
Mr. Bruno,
Yes.
Mr. Richtel.
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Mr. Vial.
Yes.
Ms. Hyde.
Yes.
Ms. Coates.
Yes.
Processing deer meat and stuff.
Huh?
He cuts
Slaughterhouse.
Okay, and then I got one more, this is an inquiry on the Dana Road situation. Do we have another court date?
We have to get them reserved, we gotta locate them.
Okay.
That's all.
Well, if somebody will just go out there, they're out there in those weeds. Just, if
What,
you,
the goats?
no, well, the goats are there, but the people are in the weeds. So if you go out there, you'll find them, they're there.
All right, Mr. Mayu?
I also have a situation in my district, must be situation night tonight, but I have someone that went in a subdivision and opened up a sober living community for alcoholics and I think drug addicts. They didn't follow any kind of guidelines that the ordinance shows. They haven't come in front of council, and I requested that the attorneys send them a cease and desist letter to shut down until they come in and get the proper paperwork in order and get the proper permits and whatever else they need to, if they're gonna do this in a subdivision. I got a lot of resistance from the neighbors of filing a petition already, but the main thing is that they have to come in front of council and get the proper permits and allowance in there. And there's no supervision there. There's people running all over the neighborhoods, and people are kind of pretty upset right now. I don't know if I need to make a motion for
We need
Brad
to add it.
to add.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to add it to the agenda.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Mayu, second by Mr. Forrest, that we add this to the agenda. Ready? Yeah, roll call.
Mr. Ingraffia,
Yes.
Mr. Joseph, Mr. Bruno,
Yeah.
Mr. Richtel,
Yes.
Mr. Mayu.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Mr. Vial.
Yes.
Ms. Hyde.
Yes.
Ms. Coates.
Yes.
Mr. Forrest.
Yes.
All right, now make the motion for Brad to send them a legal letter, tell them that they're gonna have to go through the proper channels to get the proper permits to operate the facility in that area if they are able to do it.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Mayu that we have our legal counsel send them a letter, second by Mr. Mayu, roll call, please. I'm sorry, second by Mr. Ridgell.
Mr. Bruno.
Yes?
Mr. Richtel.
Yes.
Mr. Mayu.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Mr. Vial.
Yes.
Ms. Hyde.
Yes.
Ms. Coates.
Yes.
Mr. Forrest.
Yes.
Mr. Ingraffia.
Yes. Anybody else want to give me some homework?
You only have two,
We'll
can
do
you
that on
handle those?
Wednesday. We'll do that on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Brad, I have one offline. We'll do it after the meeting.
Yes, sir.
I know Mr. Wells mentioned in his prayer, Mr. Joseph's family. Mr. Joseph lost his brother, and he's in North Carolina.
His last brother.
Yeah, his only living brother. He's in North Carolina with his family right now. He and his 4 brothers all served in the U.S. Army, so they're a wonderful family. We want to keep them in our prayers. Anyone else? All
Yeah.
right, Mr. Wells. Oh, Ms. Kim?
Yeah. So I also wanted to kind of follow up from Robbie with the DEQ award. That was very special to us that we were recognized by the entire state for going ahead and being, active, trying to clean up the litter and clean up the parish and keep it as beautiful as possible. So that was very exciting to have been awarded that. And we are also getting additional funding for a 4th litter getter. So we are working on that. Osprey Initiative actually wants to model Tangipahoa Parish across the state and seeing what we can do and show others how great we are. So that was very good. And thanks to Robbie, the administration, code enforcement, all the volunteers, all of Ginger going into schools, so it's really made a difference, and so I appreciate it.
Anybody else? All right, Mr. Wells, I'll entertain your motion.
And I'll make it without comment. I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.